First tonight, a warning that life-saving homelessness services across the region are facing an enormous crisis after years of chronic underfunding. That's from the head of the Nottingham-based charity Framework. Well, this is what we may think of when we talk about people being homeless on the streets, sleeping in doorways. Latest figures suggest 373 people sleep rough in the East Midlands on a single night. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. More than 3,500 households are officially registered as homeless. That's families having to sofa surf or live in B&Bs, or addicts who need intensive support. Well, today the government called homelessness a moral stain and announced new financial support. But the head of Framework, Andrew Redfern, says some services are now unsafe after 15 years of cuts. He's retiring after nearly 3 decades in charge, and he's spoken to our social affairs correspondent, Jeremy Ball.
So as you can see in here,
Grove House in Nottingham, 15 new self-contained flats for women who need complex support.
Gosh, that's nice, isn't it?
Andrew Redfern's convinced this is the best way to tackle homelessness. It's so much more than a bed for the night. There are staff on hand round the clock to help residents rebuild shattered lives.
Supported housing really matters, alcohol, drugs, mental health, family breakdown, people who've been in care, people who've been evicted from Home Office hostels, people who the DWP have messed up their benefits. We are the source of hope. We have such brilliant staff dealing with an attempted suicide or an overdose or breaking up a fight or coping with someone who's just been evicted.
This is part of a service that Andrew Redfern's transformed from a small local charity. He retires from one that now houses over 1,400 men and women across Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Lincolnshire and Sheffield.
just open up the bag a little bit.
Some residents at Grove House were picked up by Framework's street outreach team. They've seen a sharp rise in people sleeping rough.
Hello.
In about 2010, we'd got rough sleeping to historically low levels. Services are frankly not as good as they once were because they're chronically underfunded. A lot of the supported housing that we used to have, including some very, very good quality services, have simply ceased to exist. And what's left is struggling along. It's on its last legs. It can't be delivered safely or effectively.
How much of a crisis is this?
Oh, it is a crisis. It's an enormous crisis. We were once able to employ a specialist drugs worker or a specialist mental health worker. You are constantly worried about whether something dreadful is going to happen. And the question becomes, is it better to do something that's inadequate or nothing?
This is a service that's picking up the pieces for men and women who've lost hope, giving them the confidence and skills to survive on their own and to start building a future.
Well, Jeremy's here in the studio. Strong words from Andrew Redfern there. Why do they carry so much weight?
Well, sir, because he has been in charge of tackling homelessness for almost 3 decades now, and you can hear just how concerned he is as he hands over the reins. Now, today the government's housing secretary has been talking about this as well. Steve Reed called homelessness a moral stain on our society. He talked about growing numbers abandoned to sleep rough. He talked about children living in squalid, overcrowded conditions. And that's because he's been announcing some extra funding to help those children today. That includes councils across the East Midlands sharing over £5 million for things like school transport and clothing.
How much of a difference is that likely to make?
Well, I think for those families who don't have a permanent home, it could make a really big difference. But it is a tiny fraction, really, of what councils have to spend on people in temporary accommodation. And of course, that's money that they can't use for other services. Looking at the bigger picture, the government says there has been record spending on homelessness overall this year, £1 billion this year, which is an eye-watering number, but still raises some big questions really about whether it's enough to keep up with that growing demand, and also whether organisations like Framework will be able to replace those vital services they've lost. Here's Andrew Redfern again.
I think it's something we can't afford not to do. It might prevent a drug overdose, it might intervene when one happens, but there's no doubt that in some cases lives have been saved, and I think the number is probably in the thousands rather than the hundreds. Well, we always say that we're working for a time when we're not needed. Sadly, that's probably as far away now as it was 29 years ago when I first joined.
Now, we talked about saving lives there. A lot of that is down to addiction services, but this week one national report found that over 1,600 men and women died while they were homeless last year. 22 of those people were in Nottingham, and that's why tackling this is such a huge priority.
Absolutely. Jeremy, thank you so much. Thank you for that.